Welcome to the Elvis Presley Channel. When Elvis got married to Priscilla in 1967, many hearts were left in the wake, both married and unmarried, as he was a man who easily won the hearts of women whom he met, as well as women whom he'd never seen. But there was a clear decline after his marriage, which was clear to see. Could it be that he was no longer in love with Priscilla? Or could it be that his past lover, Ann-Margret, had enamoured herself in his heart? Well, we'd never know, but one thing that keeps most women of that age awake today is this question: would Elvis have been better off with Ann-Margret? Who would be better with Elvis, Priscilla or Ann-Margret? Well, we'll find out in this video, but before we go on, kindly like this video and subscribe to my channel. Now let's get the ball on a roll. Elvis and Ann-Margret. The MGM soundstage was virtually vacant save for a grand piano. A few technicians could be heard carrying out equipment back and forth in the corner, but other than that the only sound was the echo of heels on the smooth wooden floor. Photographers began snapping pictures of Ann-Margret and Elvis Presley as they moved over to each other, evidently anticipating an historic moment for the studio. The significance of the meeting, on the other hand, was missed by the two. "I'd like you to meet a great young lady named Ann-Margret," George Sidney, the director of MGM's upcoming movie Viva Las Vegas, told Elvis Presley. "This is Elvis Presley, Ann-Margret." They gently clasped hands, garbling the words, "I've heard a lot about you," at the same time, leaving them staring at each other blankly until they began to chuckle, nervously at first, but then with increasing confidence, until their laughter was bouncing around the walls like so many pinballs. That meeting would kick off a fruitful working relationship between Ann-Margret and Elvis that would eventually turn amorous, with the set of Viva Las Vegas serving as the background for one of Hollywood's most flamboyant on-set love affairs. In July of 1963, Ann-Margret met Elvis Presley on the set of Viva Las Vegas, when she was 22 and he was 28. Elvis Presley was already a well-known actor with 14 films under his belt when he met his co-star. Ann-Margret, on the other hand, was just starting. Ann-Margret, the star of Bye Bye Birdie, was fully aware that he had won the hearts of nearly every woman he'd ever met. He'd even managed to win over the hearts of ladies he'd never met by being the late-night fantasy of every housewife in America. Ann-Margret, on the other hand, had not anticipated falling in love with him. She and Elvis were sent to a recording studio before principal photography began to record their solo numbers for the project. Their minds probably drifted back to that initial meeting in the darkness of MGM studios as they cycled through their separate repertoire, singing take after take after take. Then on July 11th, Elvis and Ann-Margret got into the same small studio to record 3 duets: The Lady Loves Me, You're the Boss, and Today, Tomorrow and Forever, starting something that would continue to smoulder as principal photography began and they travelled to Las Vegas. Their courtship started in earnest here. Initially Elvis and I might have conceded that the only heat between us came from the blazing desert sun, Ann-Margret reportedly recounted. But as the days progressed, it became evident that the co-stars were besotted with one another. Between takes they'd disappear into his dressing room. They had a private lunch together. Elvis and Ann-Margret instantly fell in love, discovering in one another all they lacked in themselves. Everything they liked about life was reflected onto them, as if they had both fallen into a hall of mirrors and decided to make it their home. They were perfectly aligned even when they danced. They were very honest with one another and basked in it for as long as they could. During the filming of Viva Las Vegas, Ann-Margret realized that Elvis Presley had a huge ego. Elvis believed that the director, George Sidney, was favoring his co-star by providing her favorable camera positions. Elvis claimed that he was attempting to cut him out of the picture. In some ways he was correct. In the final cut, it was evident that George Sidney had prioritized Ann-Margret's beauty and dancing abilities, even if it meant that Elvis had to take a back place on occasion. Despite the backlash, the singer of Hound Dog found a cause to swallow his pride. When watching the final cut of Viva Las Vegas, it's evident that Elvis had the most musical exposure. He had 6 solo numbers versus Ann's 2. Naturally, her dancing prowess was highlighted, but Viva Las Vegas comes across as an Elvis Presley film, with Ann-Margret as a strong leading lady. Ann-Margret was not accused by any of the pro-Presley accusations of the director's perceived favouring of her, and she did not discuss the topic in her book. Elvis's professional jealousy did not flow over into his relationship with Ann-Margret in the camera angle incident. According to all accounts, it swiftly turned into a full-fledged love affair. Elvis's affair with Ann-Margret was more than an affair, Lamar Fike stated. He was head over heels in love with her. It became hot and heavy. Neither one of them was married, and they genuinely cared a lot about each other, Marty Lacker chipped in, but Priscilla returned to Graceland. Ann-Margret, for one, avoided discussing her passionate love for Elvis in her book, instead of focusing on the motorbike journeys and other adventures they experienced as close friends. Still, it's apparent their intimate relationship continued long after filming on Viva Las Vegas had been concluded. In his book, Jerry Schilling reported seeing Ann-Margret enter Elvis's California home late at night in the fall of 1964 with her key and make her way up to Elvis's bedroom. Marty Lacker claims she used to write him letters and sign them Bunny or Thumper, and she'd call Graceland and use the same code. And Ann-Margret admitted in her book that Elvis knew I loved pink and had given me a round pink bed in a moment of tenderness. When production for Viva Las Vegas wrapped, Ann-Margret and Presley's affair continued, with Elvis lavishing letters, flowers and extravagant presents on his one-time co-star. Their relationship, however, came to an abrupt end. Their love affairs had to come to an end eventually, at least according to Ann-Margret. There were other elements in Elvis's life that pulled him apart from me, and I understood them, she wrote in her autobiography. Elvis had always been straightforward with me, but it was still a perplexing scenario. We continued to see each other regularly until we had been dating for over a year. Then everything came to a halt. We understood the relationship had to come to an end, and Elvis had to keep his word. On May 1st, 1967, he married Priscilla in Las Vegas. Ann-Margret made a similar pledge a year later in the same city when she married actor Roger Smith. Elvis and Ann-Margret remained good and faithful friends for the next 10 years of his life. Elvis sent her a guitar-shaped floral arrangement when she made her maiden appearance on the Las Vegas stage in June 1967. For the remainder of his life, he continued the technique for all of her Las Vegas openings. According to Lamar Fike, Ann-Margret was in the audience when Elvis opened at the International Hotel on July 31st, 1969. Through the 1970s, they would go to each other's Las Vegas shows whenever they could and visit afterward. Both would deal with drug addictions in the 1970s. Ann-Margret battled alcoholism, while Elvis took prescription medicines. She added, "I reached a point when my days and nights merged into one continuous fuzzy state of inebriation. I'd drink a fifth of scotch, pass out, wake up, drink more, and pass out once more. I had periods where I couldn't remember what I was going through." Ann-Margret was able to overcome her addiction, but Elvis was not. She first heard reports regarding Elvis's ill health in early 1977. She asked Joe Esposito how Elvis was doing when he arrived at her show at the Tropicana in Las Vegas. "Don't worry," he assured her. "Everything is fine. There are a few issues, but we're working on them." She said the affair was a force we couldn't manage in a 1994 interview with the New York Times. Ann-Margret and Presley, on the other hand, picked different partners when it came time to settle down. In May 1967, the jailhouse rock singer married Priscilla. Ann-Margret married her manager Roger Smith after their wedding, a decision she never regretted. Although Ann-Margret had no regrets for selecting another man over Presley, she did reveal in her book Ann-Margret, My Story, that the singer's hope was that we could be together. Unfortunately, they opted to stay friends owing to his commitments to his engagement. "We were soulmates, bashful on the exterior, but free on the inside," she wrote. "We both lived on the edge, and in our ways we were both self-destructive. Despite our popularity and whatever else we'd accomplished so swiftly, both of us had remained infantile and emotionally dependent in many ways. Other events in Elvis's life pulled him apart from me, and I understood them, she explained. We continued to see each other regularly until we had been dating for over a year. Then everything came to a halt. We understood the relationship had to come to an end, and Elvis had to keep his word. Even though their love connection had come to an end, Presley and Ann-Margret remained friends for many years. During every performance she did in Las Vegas, he would give her flowers. Ann-Margret found out he had died when he didn't give her flowers. Elvis and Priscilla. Elvis and Priscilla had quite a history that many were not very acquainted with before they finally tied the knot. Elvis and Priscilla Presley were one of the most recognized celebrity couples of their day, although Priscilla Presley was not a star. Nonetheless, the way they met and fell in love was uncommon. While the couple's romance is still talked about, it wasn't quite the fairy tale that everyone had hoped for. The love story of Elvis Presley and Priscilla Presley may not be for everyone. Elvis and Priscilla met when Elvis was in the military, and Priscilla was only 14 years old. Priscilla went to see Elvis with some pals, and he was immediately taken with her. He sang her several songs, and they kissed the next time they saw each other. Priscilla was still too young for Elvis. Although they started a relationship, Elvis and Priscilla never married. He insisted that they wait despite her wishes. Elvis kept his distance from her until they married, but it didn't mean he didn't have other relationships. Elvis persuaded Priscilla's parents to let her date him in the end. When he returned to the United States, she, on the other hand, stayed in Germany. Despite this, after nearly 2 years of silence, Elvis called Priscilla and begged her to join him in the United States. Once again, Elvis was able to persuade Priscilla's parents to consent to the move. Priscilla moved to the United States and stayed with Elvis at Graceland. Elvis seemed to enjoy the couple's age difference, despite some doubts. He allegedly told a friend that Priscilla's inexperience allowed him to teach her whatever way I want. Elvis was still uncertain about marrying her. Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, encouraged him to walk down the aisle. Parker didn't believe it was a good look for Elvis to live with a minor and then refuse to marry her. Elvis accepted and went ahead with the marriage, even though the couple's relationship was already strained. Elvis had been unfaithful to Priscilla since the beginning of their relationship. He realized he couldn't have sexual relations with her because she was too young, so he sought fulfillment elsewhere. However, the infidelity continued, and Priscilla began to have her affairs. Priscilla had an affair with a karate instructor whom Elvis introduced her to. She was honest when she told Elvis about the relationship. He was said to have mishandled the situation by forcing himself on her and then considering hiring a hitman to assassinate her lover. The love triangle. Well, if there's something this video has told us so far, it's the fact that both relationships were better off apart, as they all had issues to deal with, and had they decided to endure relationships with Elvis, they would all end up more broken. Elvis was furious when he found out that his romance with Ann-Margret was in the press. After meeting on the set of Viva Las Vegas, Ann-Margret and Elvis formed an instant bond. For approximately a year the two dated on and off. Priscilla, it turned out, had suspected this possibility from the start. However, Elvis reassured her that Ann-Margret was a leading lady, and he wasn't fond of leading females. They're into their jobs, and their man comes second, Priscilla recalled Elvis telling her in her memoir Elvis and Me, published in 1985. I'm not interested in being second to anything or anyone. Elvis returned home one day from a vacation to Los Angeles with a newspaper bearing a fake engagement announcement regarding his romance with Ann-Margret. Colonel Tom Parker, the King's manager, decided to send Priscilla back to Graceland to hide until the craze cooled down. Elvis's first reunion with Priscilla seemed forced when he returned to Graceland. It's over, Scylla, he assured her as soon as he had a minute alone with his fiancée. To you I swear it's finished. Priscilla was fuming. She tossed a vase across the room, screaming that she was tired of secrets and lies. In response, she said Elvis tossed her on the bed and assured her that he had no idea his affair with Ann-Margret would end up this way. I want a woman who understands that things like this might just happen. Are you going to be her or not?" When it came to Ann-Margret, Elvis told Priscilla that he was simply caught up in a situation that was out of hand from the beginning. He said he felt exploited, and that his co-star wasn't right for him. While Priscilla and Elvis reconciled, especially after she discovered a telegram from Ann-Margret to Elvis that appeared to confirm their breakup, she confessed she was wary following the fiasco. She'd recognized that her feelings for the king of rock and roll were a lot more complicated than she'd previously thought. Who do you think was better off with Elvis? If you want to enjoy more videos about Elvis and his relationships, I do recommend this video. Now you'll have the answer to why Elvis would have always chosen Priscilla over Ann-Margret.